Welcome to another edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with my co-host, Jonah Bronstein of the New Bronstein Times. Two guests on this edition. First, we're going to hear from Gene Kershner. He's the horse racing columnist for the Buffalo News, and he's going to preview the 149th running of the Kentucky Derby, which takes place Saturday at 6:57 p.m. How's that for a precise time for you? And then we're going to be joined by Channel 4 sports director Josh Reed to talk about this, that, and the other, but particularly the Bills draft class and the ups and downs, the yin, the yang, the positives, the negatives. The Bills draft class, I think, Jonah, there have been some things that have happened that weren't really draft picks that I think are players that we need to consider as part of this draft weekend. They made a couple of signings of players at positions that they didn't draft. Latavius Murray, running back, and Poona Ford, the defensive tackle. Brandon Beane had said that he wanted a defensive tackle in the draft. Just didn't have the ability to take one that he was comfortable with. So they get back on the phones and talk to Poona Ford, get him signed to anchor that defensive front. And we learned that Brandon Beane had actually been talking to Latavius Murray during the draft and came to an agreement with his camp that they would not draft another running back if they had him committed. And so that way it would clear a path, I think, for Latavius Murray to have a better chance to stick on the team and also afford Brandon Beane to look at other positions, and he wouldn't have to worry about drafting a running back. So I just wanted to mention those two signings, Joni, which you mentioned before we hit the record button here about how these are important players, or could be, for the upcoming season, not to be overlooked.
Well, when we talk to Josh Reed later, we're going to get into the draft analysis, all three of us. But my general opinion, going into the draft, I think it gets overcovered. The media coverage of the draft, it's become a beast unto itself, more so than the impact on the NFL, the coming NFL season. And then the post-draft analysis, I think, always focuses a bit too much on how these players fit the current roster, the current depth chart, and projections on whether Dalton Kincaid or O'Cyrus Torrence are going to help the Bills win the Super Bowl this coming year or plug holes in the roster this coming year. And that usually doesn't happen with rookies. It happens more often with first-round picks than the later round picks, and it doesn't happen very often at all with players drafted outside the first round. And if you look at the Bills draft class last year, nobody became a full-time starter as a rookie, and the snap count percentages were low for a lot of the players, even though they have promising futures. They didn't have big-time impacts on what the Bills did last year, and that could be the case with this draft class again, or they could get a little more impact, but you're not going to get dynamite rookies, I think, being their full potential as players right away. Free agent signings like Latavius Murray and Poona Ford might not be huge dynamic impact players, but they're being brought in on one-year deals to help this team right now. And you can see that the Bills made a choice when it got into the middle and late rounds of the draft that they'd rather sign these veteran players on one-year deals than invest draft picks in players who have longer contracts and you kind of committed to them. And I think Poona Ford's a very interesting signing because he's a good player that seems like he'd be too good to still be available on the free agent market and still available for something near a minimum salary. He's 27 years old, and the Bills have no defensive tackles under contract beyond this season. But he's a guy that if he comes in and helps the run defense and fits in as either the starting nose tackle or maybe a rotational defensive tackle piece, he could get re-signed on a bigger, longer-term contract. And I think you can put another signing, Taylor Rapp, in that same boat as a guy who they got very cheap, and it's an excellent signing for this coming season, and might be a guy who becomes a long-term solution at the position, probably on a bigger contract, but getting him in there now on this kind of bridge deal could put the Bills in a good position to add to the talent base and, build out this roster in the future.
Excellent point. You mentioned Rapp, and we had discussed it a couple of weeks back when we were pretty much shooting holes in the DeAndre Hopkins acquisition narrative that's out there. but the Bills are signing these smaller deals because they didn't want to lose out on the third round pick that they're going to get for Tremaine Edmonds, and losing him, the compensatory pick and the formula in which teams don't quite know exactly how it works because the formula has some mystery to it, but belief steadfast Brandon Beane is that they couldn't afford to spend long-term money, go years, spend too much and lose that third round pick. So with every one of these moves that have been made, I'm talking about, before the draft, but, also these Murray and Ford, there's been an eye towards economy and wondering, is this a player that I would trade a third round pick for? And in almost every case, the answer would be no, in all the different free agent acquisitions that the Bills have made. So they've been very careful to protect that third round pick that they think they're going to get. And, but I agree. I think that that Rapp is a long-term Bill, unless he has a total change of heart, but he sees what this defense does and what safeties are able to do in Sean McDermott's defense. It has made both Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer decorated players in the NFL. And that's something that has caught his attention, and it's why he wanted to join the Bills, and he's willing to do it on a short-term contract. And I think that barring, him hating Western New York or having a bad circumstance arise of some kind, that this is a place that he would make his home. And you mentioned, Ford is another great example. You mentioned his age at 27. He comes from an organization too that really values interior defensive linemen. Pete Carroll has had a lot of really good ones over the years. He has an eye for talent. Now he's a free agent, and he was able to leave Seattle. And I think that probably thought that he was going to make more money on the market than he did. And Brandon Beane mentioned that when he was asked, how do you look at these players, these veterans who are still out there? Yes, they're available, but there's a reason they're available. Are they good enough? And Brandon Beane explained that there are a lot of veterans that are still out there on the market because they were given a chance to test it, to see what they're worth, didn't get what they thought they were going to be, thought they were going to be able to. And so they're still available out there, and they're willing to reconsider other options based on not only the contract, but what's my opportunity to play, to start, to win championship. There's all kinds of things that go into a decision when things didn't go as you thought, and you were just going to cash that big paycheck. So if you have a bunch of teams that are out there offering you less than you felt you were worth, then that's when you start looking at the best location. And so Poona Ford coming to the Bills could be that door that opens, and he finds that this is a place he wants to be.
And there'll be other waves potentially like that when teams make cuts at the end of training camp, and other players, veteran players that could show up on waivers or the trade market during the season, where they will be veteran players brought in specifically to fill holes and help the team now, whereas the draft is more of a long-term talent acquisition building process and developing the players you've drafted previously and other young players and things like that. I just thought it was interesting you mentioned the compensatory pick, because you kind of see that circle of life a little bit with the Bills using a third-round pick on a linebacker the past 2 years and getting another third-round pick coming to them for a linebacker that they drafted in the first round. And when Tremaine Edmonds signed with Chicago and was priced out of being a Buffalo Bill, there was a lot of speculation about what free agent the Bills might sign to immediately replace him, and what first-round draft pick they might take to immediately replace him at middle linebacker. And I think you're seeing how the geometry changes with Matt Milano, who was a later round draft pick, but now on an all-pro contract extension. And the Bills have to invest less salary cap dollars and less assets into that other every down linebacker. And they have a lot of different options. And it's just going to look a little bit different. It's different ways of roster building and team building. But ultimately, every player on that 53-man roster kind of matters a little bit towards potentially getting to the Super Bowl.
You have Josh Allen about to start his $250 million contract extension, and the Bills, as you mentioned, Matt Milano has received a big commitment financially. Do the Bills want to invest even more money into the linebacker position when they have to spread it around? Can they afford to just sink a bunch more money into a replacement for Tremaine Edmonds because it seems like the glaring hole? Well, obviously not. And I think that played into the decision not to draft a linebacker in the first round. Number one, I'm not sure that they had a first round grade on a linebacker that they thought would even be available in their neck of the woods at 27, which was their original pick. Of course, they traded up to 25 to get Dalton Kincaid, but linebacker is just a position that you don't want to, I think, sink just additional funds into. And if you draft a linebacker in the first round, that's a contract. You want the player to work. And then when it comes time to re-sign this player, now you have Milano. Maybe maybe Milano's aging out at that time. I don't know, but I think that it was a little short-sighted with some of the analysis about the Bills going after a linebacker in the first round to not understand that there's a holistic aspect to the defense. And I wrote about it, and there are some clues all throughout that piece that I wrote about the Bills thinking that they're going to be better on defense with the players they already have because they're coming off of injuries. They're all going to be playing together. Micah Hyde's going to be back. Tre'Davious White is going to start the season with the healthy knee. You're going to have two rookie cornerbacks who are going to be a year better. Jordan Poyer's back, and you can probably assume that he's not going to suffer a collapsed lung again. Yes, he's a player who gets banged up because of the way he plays, but some of the injuries were, or at least the rib injury is something that you don't expect. And then they go out and get Rapp. And so I think that when they look at it from, again, using the phrase holistic standpoint, they say Terrell Dodson is going to be perhaps good enough to fill in on this role. And then they bring back the backup. AJ Klein is back in there. Obviously there's a big drop from Tremaine Edmonds to AJ Klein, but the Bills survived with AJ Klein filling in for Tremaine Edmonds at times. And I think that they just look at it as we got to save money somewhere. We got to pay this quarterback. We got to pay weapons. We got to pay linemen to protect our asset at quarterback. We just can't afford to spend the money wherever somebody identifies a hole. We have to be smart. And I think that that's what they're doing. I think they're trying to do this economically, prudently. And the draft, the way the draft fell, I think shows that, because Dorian Williams, he's going to start on the outside. He's not a Tremaine Edmonds replacement. It's going to be a long-term process. I mean, it sounds like he's a project. Brandon Beane talked about just him getting a jersey on Sundays, not necessarily playing linebacker, but special teams. And so anyways, we're going to talk more about that with Josh Reed later.
And if I could just make one more point, because
yeah,
the things we say about the linebackers that we're both saying here could be flipped around and said a lot about tight ends as well, with the Bills having Dalton Knox on a second contract and a high paid tight end. I think he's in the top 8 among the NFL, top quartile of the league, and using a first and a fourth round pick to select another tight end who looks like an excellent player and exactly what this offense is needed. And it's funny because I don't think a lot of people mock the tight end to the Bills, but Brandon Beane's been telling us for a long time with his actions how much they've wanted this type of player, signing Tyler Kroft, signing OJ Howard, the rumored flirtations with Zach Ertz and Greg Olsen when he was, possibly coming out of retirement. They've wanted that type of, exactly, Rob Gronkowski. They've wanted that type of very good receiving tight end to pair with Dawson Knox and be able to play these 12 personnel sets. However, if you look at the numbers, most teams don't play two tight ends any more than 30% of the time. I think the Dolphins led the league last year, something around 60% of the time, but they never really threw to the second tight end. So it's not, they're not going to have two tight ends on the field all of the time. So it's just an interesting allocation of salary cap dollars. I feel Dalton Kincaid eventually has to be a number one tight end and put up number one tight end production to be worth that first round pick investment. And then what questions does that raise about Dalton Knox production and his contract value, and going forward in the long term, how much the Bills can invest on two players at that position?
Yeah, I think if Dawson Knox keeps dropping the ball, maybe this is his off ramp from the Bills is Dalton Kincaid. But I'm intrigued with what Brandon Beane has had to say regarding Dalton Kincaid in the slot. Obviously, not a traditional slot receiver by any stretch, but if he's able to fill that role and stay on the field at the same time with Dawson Knox, it could create all kinds of different opportunities, a chance for Ken Dorsey to get creative, be resourceful with what he has. Let's see what Ken Dorsey does. But let's talk to Gene Kershner. Jonah, I know you want to excuse yourself here from this segment.
I got to go to work.
And be back a little bit later to talk with Josh Reed. But after this break, we're going to have Gene Kershner to talk about the Kentucky Derby Saturday. CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach that takes on each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills to provide creative solutions for their clients. Based right here in Western New York, CTBK is a champion for your business and our community. Additionally, CTBK goes beyond tax and attest services by offering a wide array of consulting and outsourced solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your business, allowing you to focus on your operational and long-term strategic goals. Whether you're a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, the team at CTBK is determined to help you succeed. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400. 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK's one-team approach can work for you. Welcome to the Kentucky Derby edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with the K from CTBK, Gene Kershner, with his annual preview of the Kentucky Derby. This is going to be the 149th Run for the Roses Saturday with a start time of 6:57 p.m. It is the fastest 2 minutes in sports. So that's why it starts at 6:57. And it'll get you right to the top of the hour. Gene, how have you been cramming for this race? It is an interesting one, and I'm looking forward to it. Well, how you been approaching this?
Well, you have to do your homework on the Kentucky Derby with 20 horses that are in the race and 3 also eligible. So as we found out last year, if you don't spend some time even looking at the also eligibles, and if a horse sneaks in the race on Friday, he can actually win the race at 80-1 or some crazy odds. I don't see it happening this year, but nobody saw it coming last year, which was fun. And Rich Strike, who did that, is actually running on the undercard on Derby Day. So we'll get to see him, as well as the Kentucky Oaks winner from last year, Secret Oath, who trained by Dwayne Lucas, who will also run on Saturday.
Some interesting wrinkles with the trainers this year. You mentioned Dwayne Lucas there. Bob Baffert is in this race by extension only because of his suspension. But this would appear to be Todd Pletcher's race to lose, because he has 3 talented horses in this race. Forte is the early favorite. Tapit Trice is the second favorite. And then Kingsbarns is the 4th favorite right now and is undefeated. So the worst of his horses has never lost. And they had good draws on the posts. Forte is at the 15th, which might be a little far out, but still, at least it's not on the rail. Tapit Trice is in the 5th spot, and then Kingsbarns is right next to him at the 6th post. So it would seem as though Pletcher is in really good position to win this race. Of course, there are 17 other horses in it. So having great shot to win it doesn't mean you're necessarily mathematically guaranteed anything.
True. He's loaded. He's got 3 really good horses. Anytime you've got 3 out of the top 4 on the morning line, that's saying something. And he is a trainer that just knows how to get horses to the Derby. He's coming into the race with the most starters in history, with 62 starters over time. He's won the race twice. And you may say that, well, that that percentage isn't very good, but it's just so hard to get there in the first place, and to have that many horses that have qualified over the years. So he has the favorite. The last time he won was 2017 with Always Dreaming, and that was the favorite that year. And he won with that horse. Interesting combination of the owners of Forte, the favorite. Mike Rapoli of Vitamin Water fame. That's where he made his money. He'll run in the silks of the New York Mets because he's a big Mets fan. So you'll see the orange and blue on Forte. And then his other owner is Vinny Viola, who owns the Florida Panthers, who now moved into the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it's a big sports combination there in the ownership group there. The other two horses are actually next to each other in the post, as you mentioned, fifth in the post 5 and 6, Tapit Trice and Kings Barnes. I kind of like Tapit Trice in the Belmont because he's a Tapit horses have done well over the last 7 or 8 years in the longer distance, mile and a half at Belmont. So looking for him maybe down the road, but he could certainly, he's obviously got the stamina and pedigree to handle the mile and a quarter distance of the Derby. Kings Barn lightly raced colt out of Uncle Mo. Uncle Mo was ironically was a Rapoli horse back in the day, who was going to be the Derby favorite in 2011, and then he had an injury during Derby week and had to scratch out of the race. So he again is a horse that can handle the mile and a quarter, and his dam is by Tapit. So you're just kind of hearing the same names over and over again. That the pedigree is so important, especially at this at the mile and a quarter distance, which is the first time these horses will ever run that distance.
I want to ask you about Forte's pedigree because it is not illustrious, and his father being Violence with almost zero record to speak of, retired early in his career. When you're handicapping a race like this with the elite horses all together, or theoretically speaking anyway, sometimes you miss out on one, or one doesn't make it for an injury or whatever. But when you're talking about the race of all races, how much do you weigh pedigree when it comes to making your picks?
In this race, more than any other, only because of it's a distance they've never run before, being a mile and a quarter. Again, the Belmont is another one, but in the Belmont they slow it down early sometimes, so it ends up being more of a mile and a quarter, mile and eighth race, because the first half mile, 3/4 of a mile, they're really not going as fast. Whereas in the Derby, you typically get a pretty good pace to start the race. So you've got to be able to, keep it up if you're going to be, up and near the lead, depending on how fast the fractions are early on. The one thing I do look at is at least one side of the pedigree has a horse that can go the distance. So on Forte's side, on the dam side, Blame is the dam sire, and he won the Breeders' Cup Classic at a mile and a quarter, beating Zenyatta, holding off Zenyatta by a hair at Churchill Downs. So I look at that. Violence, was, like you said, was more of a sprinter type, miler type. Got hurt on the Triple Crown Trail early. He looked very promising during his time on the trail. But got injured and basically retired at that point. So, but he was a fast horse. So if you can mix that speed with stamina, I wouldn't throw Forte out for the fact that Violence is the sire on this horse. And he's got Irad in the irons, who's probably the best jockey in the world right now, or at least on this continent. I think that combination, Fletcher or Ortiz Jr., that's a dangerous combination. And with the gate with now the starting gate being one gate as opposed to gates 1 through 14, and then having an auxiliary gate between 15 and 20, a lot of horses that were in that 14-15 spot, there was an opening between them and it caused collisions. I remember one year I picked Mendelssohn to win, and he was coming out of 14 and he just got wiped out at the start, finished dead last. it's always good when your top pick, finishes dead last, but it happened. And then in this race, crazy stuff can happen, with the traffic issues. And, if a horse has to stop in a race like this and has to check and move out, it means that he's probably not going to get there.
We talked about Kings Barnes. I just want to make one more point. He is undefeated. But here's an interesting statistic. Let me spit this out again. Let me try again. Let me rewind. An interesting statistic, which you shouldn't say 3 times fast, is that this is the 35th undefeated horse to enter the Kentucky Derby. There have only been 9 of them that have won. So just because the track record heading into this race is unblemished is no guarantee of anything, and which is probably why Kings Barnes is not among the top 3 favorites. But your thoughts on Kings Barnes? Oh, and by the way, Jose Ortiz, who's his jockey, has had 7 mounts in the Derby and has never won either.
Yeah, that's true. But he's due. He'll win one of these days. I just don't think it's going to be on Kings Barnes. The only horse that's won with only 3 races and all in their current year racing is Justify, who won the Triple Crown, which was a feat that was almost incredible. That didn't race during his 2-year-old season and came in and won the Triple Crown. So what they're asking him to do is would be historical should he win the race. So he hasn't seen the traffic that he's going to see in a race like this. He's a forwardly placed horse, so he's never really gotten dirt in his face in any race. So those are the things that kind of work against a horse like that. But he's got the pedigree to do it. It wouldn't surprise me if he did win, because he's talented. He won the Louisiana Derby very impressively. And Pletcher knows how to get him to the track. That's for sure. But if he doesn't win, we probably won't see him in the Preakness, because Pletcher doesn't like to run him back unless he's got the winner, and he likes to just bring him back either in the Belmont or get him ready just for Saratoga in the Travers.
The most successful jockey in this running is John Velazquez. He's won the Kentucky Derby 3 times, and there is a backstory with him and his horse Reincarnate, and that's the Bob Baffert Association. Can you give a quick overview on how Reincarnate is in this race as a asterisk Bob Baffert horse?
Yeah, so he was transferred from the Baffert barn after his win in the Sham out at Santa Anita. So he won that out of the Baffert barn, but because Bob has been banned from Churchill Downs for 2 years, and any horses running under his name cannot earn any points during the Derby prep races. He didn't earn any points for that Sham win, even though it was a Derby qualifying race. So his owners obviously made the switch from him to Tim Yaktine, who has worked closely with Bob over the years in the California racing circuit, and he got transferred to the Yaktine barn. And Tim actually has a good horse in the race that's of his own, so he's a very good trainer. He's got Practical Move, who's in the 10 spot. So he's got Johnny V on the horse, Hall of Famer. Has won it a couple times. He stole the race a couple times. He stole the race with Always Dreaming. He's stole the race with Authentic a couple of years ago for Baffert. So where you got to be careful with him is he's going to probably go with this horse. He should be out early in the lead and see if he can control it, because there isn't a lot of speed in the race. So if he can control things early the way Johnny V can, who knows what can happen. He's had a good Magic, who finished second in the Derby in his year. So a good horse. That's his sire that can obviously handle the distance. And he's out of a Scat Daddy dam, who Scat Daddy was trained by Pletcher back in his day and ran in the Derby. So he's an interesting horse. I actually had him in my long shot column in the Buffalo News on Sunday as one of 3 long shots to consider. He's at 50 to 1. But he's worth laying a couple bucks on to win, just because if Johnny V can get him out front and take him around like a merry-go-round, like he did with Authentic, who knows?
So, in an official sense, this is not Bob Baffert's horse this weekend, but from a philosophical sense and in the racing community, even though it's not, it's not going to go in the record as a Bob Baffert race. If Reincarnate were able to win, would this be accepted at least loosely as a Bob Baffert victory?
Not in the record books.
Right.
Maybe on the street corners of Louisville.
Right on. Well, I want to ask, there's a fascinating horse out of Japan, Derma Sotogake. And I don't know if this is going to be a more regular occurrence because of the horses that are backed from Japan. And there just seems to be a mysteriousness about this horse winning the UAE Derby and having success not in the United States yet. How do you handicap these horses? Obviously, there's a lot of statistics and things to look at, but how do you go about it?
You have to look at the replays. I actually watched the UAE Derby, live on television, so I watched that race. They're trying to get more, horses. There's two qualifying horses, races that they can qualify for. There's a different series of races both in Japan and Europe, and they're trying to get a Japanese horse in and a European horse in. The European horses that won their races and finished on top declined to come over. The Japanese horse that won was actually Continuar that won and gained an automatic slot. So there was no points that he earned. He just earned it based on winning that series of races. Dermot Sotogake is actually qualified by winning the race with the points, the UAE Derby. So he earned his way in. He's an extremely fast horse. I've watched him in the mornings because they have a morning's work show that comes out of Churchill Downs every morning between 7 and 8. And he's just an odd horse. And the way the other day he was like flicking his head to the side all the way down the track, and they did a gate work with him, and then they basically stopped him. So he was like ready to run, and so he was kind of fighting his jockey or exercise rider while he was being trained. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard. These horses that ship over that have won in Dubai, none of them have ever hit the board. I think they're 0 for 18 or something like that in the race coming over here. So, to me, until one of those horses wins the race or hits the board, I'm kind of dismissing them. And that's just my view. There's people that are very high on this horse, and because of his speed, he's very fast. But last year the horse that came out of the race, messed it all up because he went so fast early on. He created a pace scenario that set it all up for Rich Strike to come in, cruising at the end and picking everybody off. So will that happen this time? I don't think so. He's out of a horse that's was actually a New York bred, Mind Your Biscuits, who
Great name.
won at Royal Ascot. I did a feature on one of the owners of the horse is a UB grad that owned Mind Your Biscuits, Dan Summers, who works for Naira. His brother Chad trained the horse. I did a feature on him in the Breeders' Cup, several years ago. But when that horse tried to go the longer distance in the Breeders' Cup, he didn't quite get there. So he won some sprints like at Royal Ascot. He won a sprints at the UAE Carnival. So he was more of a sprinter. So he's one that you kind of look at and say, is he gonna get the distance? It looks like his dam sire, his winning distance is pretty long. So he probably can get it, but again, those horses historically have not done well in Louisville at Churchill Downs. So, whether they get spooked by the crowd too, you just never know.
What are you zeroing in on as the race approaches? I guess maybe tease your column a little bit without giving it away, or hell, maybe you want to give away all your picks to folks here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. But what is coming into focus for Gene Kershner, legendary and highly decorated horse racing columnist for the Buffalo News, as we are approaching the Kentucky Derby?
Obviously, Forte is a horse you got to consider that, it'd be a fun horse to key around. Not necessarily in first, but you could key him in second or third too. Thinking that, the horse is good enough that he's at least going to hit the board, and then you can bet around that. There's a couple of horses I've been interested in. One based on his morning workouts, confidence gains. He's looked, really, really good in the morning. Very sharp. The knock on him is that he's taking 6 weeks off since his last race to run. So that's not an orthodox way to come into the Derby. So it gives me a slight pause. But boy, he looks really good, and that always is something you got to consider about how he looks going into the race. There's another horse that just got into the race last week. It was an unfortunate incident where Wild on Ice, who qualified, had suffered a training injury and had to be euthanized on the track, which got Skinner into the race, a horse that was just nipped out of the Santa Anita Derby by Practical Move in Mandarin Hero. There was a 3-way photo. So he was right there. So, but sometimes, those kind of horses get dismissed. People look at the running line, say he came in third, what's it going to do? But I mean, it was like a hairline that he got edged out. So, and he's a fast horse. So I think he's got a shot. I put him in my long shots column. He's a 20-1 horse. I think he got a pretty decent post in the race. Let me just check right here. Yeah, he's got the 9 post, so he's in the middle. He's out of Curlin, who obviously was a 2-time, horse of the year, who could handle the longer distance out of a Malibu Moon, who sired Orb, who was a Derby winner. So, I mean, that's a horse that I'm, at 20-1, I'm thinking about it. Out of the stakes winners that won the last props, the 100-point races, the last few years, it's been a horse other than Rich Strike that has won one of those races that's going to end up being the winner of the Derby. So Angel of Empire is a horse that won the Arkansas Derby very convincingly. He's looked impressive. He's out of Classic Empire. Cox,
that's the third favorite at the moment, right?
Yeah, he's the third favorite. He's at 8-1, so he's a decent price. Flavian Pratt's won the Derby before. He won it via DQ, the year of maximum securities disqualification. So he's a horse to think, that's decent. He's got the pedigree to get there. He's looked impressive, coming into the race. He's looked good on the track in the morning. So he's one that's in my mix. My top 3, I think, right now, that I put in my degrees of separation column on Monday was Skinner, Angel of Empire, and Forte. And then maybe messing around with Confidence Game and, Tapit Trice, because, those are horses that are, can, hit the board or, be a factor if they get a good trip.
Now, I know that you put together a lot of different tickets. You have fun with it. And, but rather than get into all the different versions and permutations, what are the tickets that you will feel most comfortable with making?
I'll probably do a trifecta with Forte in all 3 spots. So it's called keying him a key box trifecta, and then put him in with like five different horses, 5 horses that I, like some of the ones that I mentioned, like Angel of Empire, Skinner, Confidence Game. And then I'll probably throw that's 3. So I'll try to throw 2 more in, maybe a closer, that might just clunk up to third. I did that last year with Epicenter, who was the favorite, and I had it all different ways without Rich Strike, right? So it's a good way to bet. And, for a 50-cent key box trifecta with 5 horses, it costs $18. So it's not like, you're not breaking the bank. It's a 20 spot, to make the bet. I'll throw some, it's the one time where if you make a show bet on a long shot and he hits the board, you can do pretty well, making some money off of that. If you're a beginner or if you're just looking to throw a five spot on a horse that's a long shot, bet him to show. You're not putting it all on that horse to win at long odds, and you can still get a good price and make a few dollars. And I'll do some exactas too, probably around whatever my top pick is. I'll box that horse with 4 or 5 horses that I like, throwing in some long shots.
Forgive me for not knowing this about your reporting process, and I don't, how much that you pay attention to the handle, any kind of analysis about how bets are being made. And the reason I ask this question is because of Rich Strike last year at 80-1 winning. Everybody knows that betting on long shots is fun. It's a popular thing to do. It just adds to the excitement for obvious reasons. But I wonder if there's any kind of, and of course, there's so many more bets to be made, but I wonder if there's any kind of analysis that shows that more long shot bets are being made this year because of what Rich Strike did a year ago.
Well, the indicator will be that there'll be no long shots at the end of the day. You'll see you'll see all of them around. If you see like the top prices around 35 or 40, then that people are they're taking the longest shot of the board and throwing $5, $10 on them, and that'll be the difference. And I think I've talked to a number of people. We're expecting that to happen. And whenever there's a horse with a name in it, that tends to generate a lot of betting interests that are just because it's just a hack, right? So it's like my boy Jack. I think I don't know how many years ago it was it's within the past 10 years was a
popular bet in the Graham household.
Should have been 25-1, 30-1. He was 5-1 at post time, which means there was somebody, and maybe it was you because your son Jack. You laid a big bet on it to move the
There are a lot of Jacks in this world.
Yeah, and so this year there's a horse named Two Phils. So if there's a lot of Phillips out there, we'll see some betting on that. And then I think the Japanese horses will probably get some of that that money that's out there. Sometimes we call it dumb money.
Right. The fish that are out there because they're easy.
Yeah, well,
they're just
betting numbers and combinations. Now I'll always bet my wife's birthday, so 21876. I'm not going to tell you what combination those are, but
Gene, I know that you're a big Bills fan, and I got to get your take on this before we hit the break. And we're going to talk about the Bills draft coming up here in a little bit. But your thoughts on how the Bills performed over the weekend with their draft picks?
It's so hard to until it's 3 years down the road to say how well they did. But early indications were that we needed playmakers on offense, and I think they did that very well. We need to protect Josh Allen, so I think they got a couple guys that are going to hit that. I think linebacker is still a big question mark, and I think a lot of people probably have that same feeling. Who's gonna be in the middle, and it's an important position because it's the position that calls the defense and the playmaker on D. So. There's still some time for him to make some moves and see what happens. But
I think the answer came to us regarding how they view the linebacker position with the fact that they didn't really target that as a priority, that I think they're at least comfortable with Terrell Dodson or whoever else emerges in training camp. And plus, they've already invested a lot of money at the linebacker position in Matt Milano. I think it's probably a good thing for Bills fans to not, even though they wanted a linebacker and they needed or they coveted a replacement for Tremaine Edmonds, flexibility with Josh Allen's contract kicking in. I don't know that you want too much money tied up at middle linebacker, but
yeah, no, I think it was smart to let him go. because I think it was too big a number, and it just wouldn't have fit some of the other things they wanted to do. But you know, who am I? I'm a horse racing guy and basketball hack.
You're at those games, man. Yeah. I mean, how did the basketball season treat you, Gene?
Pretty good.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's still going on with the
yeah,
NBA anyway, but I know
yeah.
you're being the former college player.
I follow the college a lot more. Kind of disappointing because I'm a Syracuse guy, so they haven't really done much, and now that maybe Boeheim's out of there, they can do a little bit more with Adrian Autry at the helm. I think he's a pretty good recruiter. I met the new UB coach. He seems like a real nice guy, and comes out of a big program. He's very intense. He's a type A. I can tell already. He's a type A type guy, and I think he'll do good things at UB.
CTBK is a sponsor of the UB program, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We do
right.
business.
So, all right. What is your thought as a backer, as a quasi booster? What was Gene Kershner's opinion on the decision to move on from Jim Weitzel?
I was on board with it. I had played ball in college, and I've coached a little bit, outside of that, but I just thought he could never get the right mix of the guys on the floor, and then I don't think he was as good a recruiter. Of course, the portal messes up everything, but I think they were right to make the move. It was time. He had his opportunities. He had the kids that he could have, done some damage with in Cleveland a couple times. So I think it was time to move on. I like the fresh blood, that they brought in, and I think even if it's a stepping stone, at least he can maybe right the ship a little bit. So,
all right, good. I hadn't talked to you about it. I mean, we exchanged texts about this, that, and the other, but I don't think I ever asked you about Weitzel.
Yeah.
All right. What last words of wisdom do you have about the Kentucky Derby? You gave us your picks. Is there anything else, anything to stay away from? How about that? Are there horses that you want to tell people don't waste your money on?
No, because that's the kiss of death.
Right. Then here comes Rich Strike, right?
I would say go take a look at my degrees of separation column from Monday, where I do separate them, and the ones that I say just aren't fast enough to get there. There's a number of them I think you can eliminate in the race. I'm just not going to go on a limb because the horse will end up winning. And
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm
just hoping
that's
for
a no-win situation.
Yeah, I'm just hoping for good weather because it's hard. It's hard, and I'm ready to go on Thursday if it looks like there's something that the weather's going to turn, because I think Friday's not going to be so nice. I usually put together a piece on who's going to handle the wet track.
Okay. Yeah, can you maybe tease what's coming up here in your coverage leading up to the race in the Buffalo News?
Yeah, so I will have a feature on Friday to be determined. I usually like to see what happens, on the backstretch on Thursday to see what kind of stories are on,
It would be silly not to gather as much information as possible before writing the final columns about the Kentucky Derby.
Yep, absolutely. And then my advance will go in on Saturday morning, which will give my top 4 selections and some analysis based on my discussions with some of the trainers on the backside on Thursday morning. And then I'll do a recap on Saturday after the race for Sunday's paper. In the meantime, I'll have an Oaks handicap on Friday, which I was working on before I jumped on the call with you. And then I'll have some undercard races on Saturday. I'll have an online column with some picks and selections for typically the 4 or 5 races leading up into the Derby. So you can, if people are looking at trying to do a pick 4 or pick 5 into the Derby, you can kind of see what my thoughts are on some of the undercard races, which have some pretty good horses in them.
So Gene's picks here today, I don't think that he's just, these are tentative. These are deeper than in pencil. I would say these are in ink. However, check the Buffalo News on Saturday to see what is in stone. because they may change a little bit, but I think that if you're listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants, you're probably in good shape already, but pick up the Buffalo News on Saturday just to double check. Is that fair?
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All righty. Gene Kershner, horse racing columnist for the Buffalo News. Thank you for joining us here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by your company. CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach to accounting and rise to each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills. CTBK goes above and beyond by lending helping hands in the Buffalo and Niagara communities through volunteer work and donations, and is partnered up with Victory Sports for 2022 to help keep kids in the community active. The professionals at CTBK are determined to help individuals and businesses succeed. Whether a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, call CTBK at 716-630-2400 and see what CTBK's one-team approach can do for you. Welcome back to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. As promised, we're going to talk some Bills draft, and we're joined again by Jonah Bronstein. He took the horse racing segment off. Religious objections, I think. And here is Josh Reed, sports director for WIVB Channel 4, the CBS affiliate in Buffalo.
One of the
I have a question for you.
I've got an answer. I'll make one up.
And you're going to the Kentucky Derby, which is great.
Yeah,
and we're going to get to that. And we're also going to talk the Bills draft, which is why Josh is here. But something that popped into my head while listening and participating in the Zoom calls with the Bills draft picks. Everybody introduces themselves as being from the call letters. Shouldn't you be telling these guys, like, they don't know what WIVB is or Channel 4? Would it be better to say, I'm the sports director of the CBS affiliate here in Buffalo? And then they'll go, whoa, wait a minute, CBS.
It is so funny that you say that. The first year that I was here, something along those lines popped up where we were actually in person. Obviously there wasn't all the Zooms that there is now, but it was something that was in person. And it was being broadcast live over the radio or whatever. And I said, hi, Josh Reed with the CBS station in Buffalo. And it was somebody who had not played here. And it was like a free agent, or they were introducing somebody. And I got so much crap for that from viewers,
from the office,
from viewers, from local people who were like, we know who, just say WIVB, right. Keep it moving there, buddy boy, new guy on the block. And I'm like, easy, pal. Like, I don't think they know what Channel 4 is if they're not from here. And So needless to say, I have changed my approach. That guy bullied me into now just saying, hey.
It was one guy?
Gosh, it was actually a couple different people. And then I was like, look, sorry, my bad. Are we not the CBS station in town? But yeah, it is kind of interesting. And I've thought that. And that has happened to me. So it is kind of weird, because if you're a free agent or a rookie and you're like, hey, Channel 4, they're like, oh, okay, next time I'm flipping through the channels, I'm sure I'll get to 4 at some point.
It was just curiosity. I don't know. It's a strategy. I'm always thinking of those media strategies, for when I get into my consulting business, when this writing thing doesn't work out. So you're going to the Kentucky Derby for the first time.
Yeah.
What's the excitement level here?
Bucket
list?
Very, very high on the bucket list. Maybe number one. If not number one, the only other one that would be kind of close, I think, would be if I could go to a major and watch, if I could check out a major at St. Andrews, that would be pretty sweet. I'm big into traveling, so part of that would be getting a chance to be over in Europe again, being over in Scotland. That'd be awesome. That's at the top. It's kind of one that I've never done. Indy 500 I've never done. That'd be cool. Actually, I'd be a Daytona 500, I think, would be awesome too. A lot of good people watching at the Daytona 500, I feel like.
I've heard that the Indy 500 is some of the most debaucherous stuff that can happen at a sporting event, right up there with the Kentucky Derby.
Oh,
That
really?
the things that happen at the parties and in the infield and all the, it is just crazy.
The only other
So
one I went to was the one in Maryland. And that was probably 20 years ago.
the Preakness.
And I was in the infield. And let's just say I'm glad cell phones were not a thing back then. Because it was like Thunderdome. It was like Mad Max. Like it was holy smokes. It definitely is one of those moments where I'm like, oh wow, that I'm glad that I survived that time.
What did you see there, Josh?
There was a lot of things I saw. Some things I'll never be able to unsee. Yeah, I like your podcast. I wanted you to be able to keep doing this, so I won't go into detail.
We get potty mouthed on here on occasion. Hey, we've had Lee Smith as a guest, so and we survived. There are no FCC regulations.
Let's just say I witnessed a couple enjoying themselves a lot. Right out in the infield, just right out there, and it had a rather large group around them watching them.
Well, it's the sport of kings.
That happens at Bills games.
It is the sport of kings.
And Jonah raises a good point. This also happens at Bills tailgates.
Oh yeah, as we're all inside the stadium at that time, so I have seen the videos though, as we all have. They tend to make it to Twitter pretty quickly.
What else is on the bucket list? Or let's start there. What else is on the bucket list? You mentioned Indy 500, Daytona.
Yeah.
For me, there's an Olympics. I've never been at an Olympics, but it wouldn't just be any Olympics. Like I wouldn't want to go watch Olympic baseball or Olympic golf. I would want to be in the arena for track and field or for something very Olympics-y.
Now we're talking not for work though, right? We're talking about just for personal going to, right?
Sure.
I've never been to or covered a Final Four. And I like college basketball a lot.
Nor have I.
I think you haven't either?
No.
That surprises me.
That's considered the easiest ticket to get for a major championship event.
Oh, is it really?
Because they're in football stadiums and just the supply demand. It's not super easy, but it's a raffle. People enter every year, and the average person can get to the Final Four a lot easier than the Super Bowl or really anything comparable to that.
Yeah, that would be up there. A Final Four, I think it would be really cool to go see, especially if you had a bunch of blue bloods in there. I get it. I know the Cinderella story is kind of fun and all, but give me North Carolina, Duke, Kansas, and UCLA, all at the top. I'd take that. But
you want the heavyweight matchup. You don't want some guy who happened to score an upset and all of a sudden he's earned a right to fight the champ
and to lose by 40. Hey, you were a boxing guy. You still are a boxing guy, but that's another thing I've never been to, like a heavyweight title bout. And I know the names aren't as big as they used to be, but that to me would have topped all of them. If I could go back in time and to have seen Mike Tyson fight, obviously Muhammad Ali was before my time, but if I could have gone back and sat ringside or anywhere really and be able to see Tyson fight, that would have been incredible.
For me, that's the score to beat. The electricity of a major boxing match. And it doesn't even have to be heavyweights, but I was in Vegas at the time of Tyson's comeback when he got out of prison, and also would be the ascendancy of Oscar De La Hoya. So I covered all of De La Hoya's fights, all of Tyson's fights, with the exception of if they went to Europe or something like that. But
who was the best interview?
Who in boxing?
The boxing side of things.
Oh Christ, they're all great.
Because they're all self-promoters, right? I mean,
there's a self-promotion aspect to it too, but they also they have publicists, but they're not polished. The publicist might help guide them to setting up an interview, but they don't sit in with them or coach them on what to say. You don't know what's going to come out of their mouths, and these are people who've lived hard lives.
Yeah.
And they have interesting stories, and they're generally proud of their backstory. Like they're not ashamed of it. It's like, I came from shit and I'm going to tell you about it. And, or maybe, they got themselves into some trouble, which happens quite a bit. They talk about that stuff pretty freely. There isn't a corporation or a league that has a bunch of suits in between you and the fighter to purify his story, or to take out all the stuff that, no, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to know. When you're sitting down with them, it's anything goes, and they're pretty open about that. So, although De La Hoya was pretty sanitized, he wasn't a great interview because he was of the corporate, he was such a star even before he turned pro coming through the Olympics. Ray Leonard had a similar vibe to him like that. But those are rare. Those are rare. Yeah, there are many more Marvin Hagler types than there are Ray Leonard or De La Hoya types. And but I've also never covered an Olympics. The 100 meters at the Olympics has to be electric. I've never covered a Kentucky Derby I've been to Churchill Downs, but never been at a Kentucky Derby. So I can't say that boxing is the most electrifying, but inherently, even without the big names, there's that risk that it could end at any time. So it is not, there's no time, obviously the rounds are timed and you have 3 minutes and 12 rounds for a championship, but the thing could end in 60 seconds. It could end in round 5. You don't know. And you have to, and you're glued to it. And it's, or game 7 of the Stanley Cup finals. I mean, something like that's got to be crazy.
Yeah. Game 7s are always. Now, did you transition to the MMA? Like, because I know that you're a big boxing person. I know a lot of people kind of made that transition when the MMA became very popular. I've always much preferred boxing over MMA.
I don't even like boxing anymore.
Some of that was just a little too brutal for me.
But no, it was just the timing of it just wasn't there for me. So when I started covering the NFL in 2007, I had no time to even think about other stuff. I went down to Miami and I was new and I was competing against 2 other newspapers and a bunch of other stuff. And my head was swimming and I just couldn't cover boxing like I had before. And so I lost touch with it. And that was when MMA, it had already become popular prior to 2007, but that's when it really was starting to hit into overdrive with the Fertittas and Dana White taking over UFC. And so, yeah, I'm not against it. There are a lot of people who are boxing reporters who hated it and thought it was beneath them. And I'm like, you cover boxing. I mean,
right.
You sit at ringside and you have blood in your coffee. There's splatters on your laptop. I mean, these people are degenerates and so are you to an extent. And I'm speaking third. I mean, yes. You take part in all well, so what? In fact, MMA or at least UFC is nicer in many ways because it is a corporate entity. And there are unlike boxing, you just don't have a lot of the darker corners don't exist in MMA like they do in boxing. But that's what makes boxing fun.
Blood in Your Coffee would be a great name of a book if you're writing one as a boxing like writer. Blood in Your Coffee. That's good.
Jonah, what's your score to beat? What's the most exciting thing you've covered or an event?
Oh, it'd probably have to be Section 6 crossover championship game, but I don't know. For a different reason, the Buffalo alumni team winning the TBT tournament last year wasn't that big of an event, but cool. Watching a local team actually win, and it was on national television on ESPN, and kind of being courtside for that live was a bit of a thrill. Maybe that's just because it happened so recently, but
NCAA tournament through Buffalo, but with the stakes not as high in those opening rounds. Those are fun. But I'm sorry, Josh, what was that?
No, it's okay. My favorite thing I covered along those lines, not like bucket list thing, but favorite thing that I covered, it was awesome. I covered the Phillies run to the World Series, and when they won their first NLCS, I was actually there because I worked in Pennsylvania. So, we were covering them a lot, obviously a lot of Phillies fans and everything. So I was there and I was kind of, down in the clubhouse and everything. And, back cell phone, I had the video, I have pictures and everything. And it's like Shane Victorino with like champagne just spraying it all over. The reporters are just getting soaked and we're trying to get interviews. But it was just fun. It was like, oh my, like, you could just, the room was so happy. Like it's hard to recreate that kind of happiness that those guys feel. And you're like, this is really cool. This is what, like, these guys are grown-ups, right? These guys are grown-ups and look how happy they are. All they did was win a kid's game, but they're so happy. So that was one of the funnest kind of scenarios I've been around. That in when UB basketball, Nate Oates and those guys won a couple of tournament games to advance. That was fun because Nate was a fun coach to cover and, really media friendly as far as just would always kind of give you the ingredients to the recipe and you'd go, I'm not used to this. So
right.
those were two fun things.
Well, and especially like a MAC championship, you win, you're in the tournament, you lose, you're not in the tournament. Those kind of stakes don't happen very often. So maybe that's not a big bucket list event, but when you're there witnessing something like that, even as a fan or covering it, you remember that, I think, forever.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim will laugh at this, but one of the most memorable sporting events I've ever attended is Baby Joe Macy fighting downtown in the arena and the buzz and how much.
I wouldn't laugh at that. I just said, I mean, it's for the whole thing. I mean, it's the drama it's tough to beat in boxing because you don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen in either way, so he obviously starches DeVero Williamson, one of the greatest nicknames of all time. This is before you got to Buffalo, but Joe Macy fought DeVero Touch of Sleep Williamson.
Wow. Baby Joe versus Touch of Sleep.
Touch of Sleep. And he made him go to sleep quickly.
Tim's not allowed to call him Baby Joe.
The Buffalo News had a rule. I can, but the Buffalo News had a rule at the time is that he could never be referred to as Baby Joe unless it was in a quote because the nickname or whatever. I think that we had an editor that kind of got sick of the nickname. They're like, it doesn't make any sense.
He's not a baby. He's a man. He's got a beard.
Right. And plus he has a great headline name. It's 7 characters and one of them's an I, which is nice and thin. So Joe Macy, you can put in a headline or just Macy. Why bog it down with Baby Joe? You're wasting space. So Josh, let's talk about this Bills draft.
Let's do it.
Not the most exciting event to cover. In fact, it's one of the dullest events of the year. I'm speaking for myself here. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but Jonah was there. Josh was there. I was there for one of the nights. And you're sitting around, especially on Thursday night, waiting for something to happen. You know the Bills are going to draft late. You're up against deadline or the 11 o'clock news in your A block or what you're going to hit. And you're just tapping your pencil. And that is not a euphemism. Literally tapping pencils. I don't mean something else. Although I wasn't home on Thursday night, or I wasn't at the draft. I was home on Thursday night. So anyway, I digress. Tell us about your draft experience, Josh. And Jonah too. You were there all 3 days.
Jonah will tell you, it is a long 3 days. Like it's a lot of hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait. We do the early newscast going into like draft coverage, at 5 and 6. So then it's like, okay, this is what we're talking about. And you preview it as you have been for a month leading up to it. And then it starts and just the between picks is so long.
Or how about when the first trade is made, which in this case was the second pick?
Yep.
You can go ahead and destroy your mock draft. All these mock drafts that you've been looking at and fiddling with and getting deep, using as your content from February to the end of April, and they are now useless.
Yeah.
They're pretty much useless when they're fresh, but
yes.
But it fills the space, whether it be in the paper or on this podcast or on a television, it fills the space.
It is content.
And people like it. It's not like we're forcing it down their throats. Like
everyone does one. Everyone does a mock draft anymore. It's just, and several.
I've never done one.
No?
Not
next year.
with the exception of participating in Channel 4's Buffalo
Well, there
Kickoff
you go.
Live.
So you have done one. You
But
have participated. No,
I've participated in a mock
erroneous.
draft. I've never done a mock draft.
No, erroneous.
Right? Does that count?
That counts.
I didn't do all the picks. I just wait until you tell me when I'm picking, and I'll pick a name. I'm not doing all 32 or this year
Jonah,
31.
Chime in here, Jonah.
No, I think you've participated in the mock draft industrial complex to some
Great.
extent. You
That's
can't
true.
claim to be mock draft pure.
I can't say that I've never done a mock draft. Is that incorrect?
You can't claim your purity from mock drafts. And I don't think, like Josh says, I don't think anybody can. I've gotten away from it. I mean, I haven't done one in many years and try not to put my brain in that space for about 4 months straight like people do. But you get to that week of the draft and you kind of can't help reading everybody else's mock drafts and starting to put it together in your head and thinking about how things will play out for whatever team you're covering or rooting for or watching on behalf of.
Well, I even made a point in the studio when we were doing our Wednesday night show, our draft preview, and we were talking not everybody, certainly not me, but Thad Brown and Matt Perino are speaking in encyclopedic terms about all these draft picks because they've been living it for 3 months. And I marvel at it because there's a very small percentage chance that you're ever going to cover these guys that you know so much about, which I guess that's not a flaw. It's not a flaw to be informed on what's going on in the NFL and to know these guys. And, but still to me, I just can't, I can't commit myself to something that will not be of any use to me in a couple of weeks.
You talk about an exercise in futility. We go to the NFL scouting combine every year, right? Spend a week there. We interview between 40 and 50 different prospects. We come back. There's usually a dozen of them that you just throw to the side and go, there's no sound here from any of these guys. Then you pare it down to, hey, here's 30 guys that there's a chance the Bills could take. Osiris Torrance was the only one that the Bills took that we interviewed there. That was it. That was it. And that's considered to be okay because he was such a high, he was a high draft pick. So it was okay. Here was the bummer. We also interviewed Dalton Kincaid while we were there. We got back and I watched the sound it was 3 minutes of an interview and it was so bad. I went, there's like nothing here. So we didn't do him. And then I go back and I go, oh, Dalton Kincaid. But
do you remember why it was so bad?
It was, some of it was because, so they bring up a herd of the prospects to the podiums. So you kind of have to pick, okay, here are the 8 guys at the podium. They're roughly up here for a total of 15 minutes. So you usually get 2 of the guys that are at the podium at a time before they leave and the next group comes up. So it's like, okay, who can we get? We ended up sitting at the first guy that we got a little longer. I forget who it was. I think it was because they were good and like they were definitely a possibility for the Bills. I think we stayed there a little longer and then we left. By the time we got to Dalton and got set up, started rolling, we got 3 minutes and it was kind of toward the end. And what you got were some of the, hey, who do you think's going to be the next good Utah tight end coming up through? So now he's answering questions about his old school and not about, hey, what do you do that's going to translate? So yeah, we did interview.
Hey, who's your agent? All these things that are easily researched online and people start asking, hey, have you met with the Jets? And it's like, it just takes up time just to get your.
Yeah, I see that you play video games. Are you an Xbox guy or a PlayStation guy? And I'm going, I mean, I get it. I mean, there are some spaces where that stuff is good and fine and all, but that's not stuff that we're going to use. And unfortunately, that one never made it to the air.
What you got to do is every one of these guys, you ask them ranch or blue cheese, and then you got a boilerplate
done
sound bites to use whenever you need it.
And that way, Bills fans can immediately have an opinion of that draft pick based on just that alone.
And it's probably going to be negative because I think outside of this concentrated area, not just Western New York. Well, I grew up in Cleveland and it was ranch. I mean,
Oh,
Buffalo
100%.
Wild Wings began in Buffalo, and their default is ranch, right?
Yep.
I think that most guys would answer ranch if they didn't know. Like, unless somebody gave them like, hey, there's a Buffalo station that's going to ask you ranch or blue cheese. You better say blue cheese.
I would argue that 95% of the people outside of New York State would answer ranch over blue cheese. 95%. I would go that high. I can tell you right now, in Ohio, growing up in Northeast Ohio, people were blown away when I told them to start using blue cheese. They were like, yeah, come on.
You're
ranch.
a Kent Stater. Did you go to BW3s?
Of course. And it was ranch.
Buffalo Wild Wings and WEC. The original Buffalo Wild Wings was called BW3s. It was in Kent, Ohio, on Water Street.
Yep.
That sound right?
Yeah,
Water Street. I've been.
Kent State, my man.
I was there a couple times. I've been. My brother and sister both went to Kent State. I worked at the newspaper in Kent, Ohio, the Record Courier. I covered Kent State sports.
Yeah.
And
ranch.
By the way, here's a little aside. I talked to Julian Edelman once about playing at Kent State, and I asked him what the name of the stadium is Dick's Stadium. Not anymore, I don't think, but at the time. And the Dick's family, DIX, was the publisher of the paper where I worked. And he was talking about playing in Kent, and there were a lot of microphones around him from the New England media. And his quote, which was used, although I don't know if it made it onto the air, was, "I love Dick's."
Yeah. Gotta be careful. Yeah.
It was a long wind up to a very short joke.
I'm
Pun intended.
Yeah. I'm assuming he was, that you say that didn't make it on air. That surprises me. That surprises me that local TV stations didn't run that.
I love Dick's.
Yeah, I don't think that.
Well, there's a sporting good chain named after it.
Yeah, and a resort.
Not
and
really.
Not
named after
resort.
the Dick's family, but I'm sorry, Josh, you said?
And a last resort named after it.
Right.
Dick's Last Resort. If you've been.
What's your I've never been inside one, just because, like, all right, we get it. All the puns.
Yeah.
I've had a few of them here myself. It's like, oh, come on. Do I need to go into Dick's Last Resort? It's like the anti-Hooters, I guess. It's just going to be a bunch of schlong references all over the place.
Yeah, and the food's not very good.
Fun if you're 15.
Sure.
First time you ever go into something like that. It was a great time.
What are your thoughts on this Bills draft class?
I like it. I do. The Dalton Kincaid thing. I feel like I don't know how many of the receivers they had ranked maybe above Kincaid as far as just pass catchers go. It was crazy because we're sitting there and you see the receivers, just the whole group of them, continue to fall down and down and down. It's like, oh wow, they're going to get one of these receivers. And then I don't remember this ever happening where 4 straight at one position like that went just bang, 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 bang. I mean, I was just like, wow, okay, well, now they're all gone. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Ken Dorsey to make it work, right? I mean, he's going to figure out a way. I mean, they didn't use this first round draft pick on a guy who plays 20% of the snaps. They've got to find a way to be creative and get him out on the field and let him make plays.
He's not going to be working in behind Dawson Knox.
No.
He and Dawson Knox are going to be on the field at the same time.
100%.
Not always, but frequently.
Yeah, I think it would be, as long as he stays healthy, of course. I think a fair maybe hope for him if you're a Bills fan, and I think realistic would be, that he finishes maybe 4th in targets. I mean, he's not going to get more targets than Diggs, right? He's not going to get Gabe Davis is going to end up with more targets, and then maybe Knox. But I mean,
maybe not, Josh. Maybe he gets the 2nd most targets. I mean, what if he's just go-to and we're going to, like a Tyler Hawkinson type, and it hasn't always been that way for Hawkinson, but on some systems. And when he got traded to Minnesota, it was like, all right, giddy up. Let's go. We got a tight end.
Yeah. I mean, if that happens, then I think Bills fans are going to be elated, right? I mean, I think they'll be like, wow, that was definitely worth it because he's going to be that involved. It'll be interesting. Osiris Torrance is the pick that I love. I mean, if they would have taken him at 27, I would have been like, Bill's got that one right. I just think he is a monster, size wise. Addressing the media, he was incredible. Not only at the combine where we had a chance to talk to him there, but then when he comes up here to the Bills facility, run blocking, pass blocking is about as good as there is in the country. And he did it in the SEC. How often do we hear Brandon Beane just readily admit, look, some of these guys are just more prepared to play at the NFL because they're playing in the SEC. And every week they're playing against a guy who's probably going to go in the top round or second round of the NFL draft. And that's what he did. He faced those guys on a week-to-week basis at Florida, and obviously did more than just hold up, dominated some of those guys. Most of those guys didn't allow a sack. Like, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how you don't allow a sack in it. And they had a quarterback, Anthony Richardson, who went fourth. Was it fourth overall to the Colts? I think it was fourth to the Colts, who is a guy who scrambles a lot, right? So
he was only sacked 13 times last season. So there's not a lot of blame to go around in terms of sack and volume anyway, but you're right. For his entire career.
Yeah. So which argument do you make? Do you make it that he escapes some of that pressure and he eludes it? Or you could make it that sometimes it's harder to protect for those guys because you don't know where the hell they are on the field. You start to pass protect, you find out he was right behind you. Now he's over here. Now he's back behind you again. And you still got to hold your block, right? So I don't know. I guess it depends on if you're the lineman, you would say, well, it's a lot harder to do. But I'm sure if you're the quarterback, you're like, well, I got you out of several sacks because I'm elusive. But
I'm sure that he didn't have an Anthony Richardson style quarterback. I don't want to say style, but at least in terms of caliber at Louisiana Lafayette before he transferred into Florida. So, yeah, it's not just last year he didn't give up a sack. He didn't give up a sack his entire career.
Which I
59th
think
overall, a steal there, I think, to get the best guard in the what it was projected at anyway to be the best guard in the entire draft. I want to say, correct myself, it's TJ Hawkinson, not Tyler Hawkinson. I think I was getting confused with Tyler Eifert. Another comparable for
also
Dalton
a tight
Kincaid.
end. Also a tight end.
Not a comparable. I was being facetious about. Let's hope he's not a Tyler Eifert.
Yeah, that would not be great. But yeah,
Jonah, you were there covering them all. What was your favorite pick? All right, how about this? Not to the first two. Where let's make it. Let's increase the degree of difficulty. Outside of Kincaid and Torrance, what was your favorite pick?
I mean, Justin Shorter has an interesting profile in terms of his size and speed, and I'm not so sure he's going to work his way into being a long-term starter at the position, but he gives the Bills something that they needed, a big target that could also stretch the field and get downfield maybe a little bit faster than Gabe Davis. I don't expect him to be an impact player maybe for this team, but he was the number one recruit coming out of his high school class years ago and didn't have a great college career, but played at big-time colleges, also played at Florida. He seems like an NFL player with an NFL body and NFL potential. If the Bills can coach him up a little bit, I think that could end up being a pick years down the line to say, wow, they got him in the 5th round. That's a pretty good pick.
Yeah, I think Bills fans need to be careful when they see a photo of this guy, and he looks great. He's got he's cut, and you get excited. But let's remember, this is a wide receiver drafted in the 5th round. Khalil Shakir was drafted in the 5th round last year and had trouble getting on the field. Here's another guy who has hamstring issues, 5th round pick. Brandon Beane's already talking about him just getting a jersey and being on special teams. I don't think that we should be getting too excited about him yet, but I think Jonah's nailed it there. I think from a development standpoint, if you can have patience with Shorter, then I think that's when you'll see some dividends. But 2023, hell, it's tough for 1st round picks as receivers to contribute as rookies.
Well, you bring up Shakir in that regard. I think Bills fans should temper their expectations for all of the picks. I mean, Torrance looks like the most likely off the bus starter, as Rex Ryan would call him, of the bunch. Even Kincaid, I think, to expect a rookie tight end to come in and be the second or third, to be the big slot receiver, or like you mentioned, second on the team in targets, or the second most dangerous threat to opposing defenses, is a lot to ask. And the hit rate on first round tight ends isn't, anywhere close to 100%. Every year there's a can't miss prospect at tight end that suddenly misses. The Bills had one on the team last year for a little while, and OJ Howard. He was supposed to be, a great tight end for Tampa Bay and never really developed. I think Dalton Kincaid's going to be a good player, but if I'm analyzing the Bills and the impact on this season from a draft class, I'm looking a lot more at last year's draft class, and in their second year not being rookies anymore, a guy like Khalil Shakir might fill a role, I think, more unexpectedly than Dalton Kincaid, and be a third or fourth most targeted player, even if he didn't look to be that type of contributor last year as a rookie.
Yeah, to your point, Kaiir Elam, I think, is that guy.
James Cook. I mean, they have actually a bunch of guys in that class that could. Terrell Bernard.
Yeah, I think Kaiir Elam. I mean, it's a little disappointing that he wasn't able to beat out Dane Jackson for that job. I get it. Look, you got to learn. You got to go through your bumps and bruises and stuff, but you got to believe the pressure's on him to win that job right out of training camp and to be the starter on the opposite side of Tre'Davious White, because I mean, your first round draft pick, you should be starting at the end of the day. I mean, that should be, I think it's impressive though, that we talked about a little bit, kind of mentioned it, but I think it's hard to criticize a draft class a whole lot when you're drafting where the Bills did, so far down in round one and down in round two. If you walk away with arguably, and I think most would say, the top player at their position, right?
There seemed to be a differing opinion at tight end between Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer.
Yeah,
but
the Bills had
Kincaid
their
was, yeah,
right?
And I think it was pretty obvious that the Cowboys were not too happy that the Bills leapfrogged them, because they looked a little confused as to what to do after the Bills took Dalton Kincaid. They needed a replacement for Jordan Schultz. Kincaid, I think, was their man, and they end up going with a totally different position. So at least two teams that were really looking at tight ends felt Dalton Kincaid was the best in this year's draft. And I'm going to side with them over a draftnik,
I agree. I think, to get him, and then coming back with Osiris Torrance, who I think a lot of people thought was the best guard in the draft class. I think you walk away with just those two, and everything else, I think Dorian Williams, we'll see. I mean, that's the one that I don't know. I don't know what to think, because I to be honest with you, I only watched like every other Tulane game this year. I mean, I
only watched the home games.
I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I watched a ton of film on Dorian Williams. I haven't. In fact, the first time I see him will be at rookie minicamp, and I'll be like, okay, let's check this guy out. Let's see if he's good. Let's see if he's not good. And even then, we won't know. It's rookie minicamp. Who's going to know? I mean, we might not know the first season if he's any good, but
I might not know until November.
The thing is like, we were all here when they drafted Matt Milano. Everybody was like, this guy is just too big to be a safety and too small to be a linebacker. He's never going to figure it out. What a bust.
He plays bigger than his size. He's always hurt.
Right?
It's bad pick.
He wasn't even a star at Boston College. What's he going to do in the league? It's like, now he's one of the best outside linebackers in the NFL. So it's just, that's the other thing. People think, because look, and I get it. It's great to talk about. It's great fodder. It's awesome. It, keeps us all having subject matter to talk about leading up to the draft. We don't know. Look, just, even the people who watch tape and break it down and stuff, you don't know more than the people inside of an NFL building. That's literally what they do for a living. I painted houses for 10 years. I'm not Picasso. It doesn't, I don't, it's that, look, you're not them. That is specifically what they do. And obviously they don't get them all right. They miss as many first rounders as they get fifth rounders right. It's an inexact science, or the same team would win the Super Bowl every single year and would never need to sign a free agent. So I don't know. Before I thought Tim Couch was going to be a surefire Hall of Famer, right? There's no doubt. The Bills took Josh Allen, and I went, Josh Rosen might have been a better pick there. I don't what the hell do I know? I don't know. It's everybody's best guess.
And it's
And the
not
teams
even
themselves
players.
don't always know. I mean, they'll even admit that there's some guessing involved, and you see it just in the list of, nobody goes 7 for 7 on their picks. And when a team like the Bills either drafts or signs 4 offensive guards, or they now have 3 draft picks at linebacker and Terrell Dotson, a lot of young linebackers, they're looking for competition because they're trying to figure out, they're not sure which of those guys is going to be the long-term answer. So they're trying to play the numbers game and hope that one of them pans out.
Josh, thanks for doing this.
Hey,
anything else you want to talk about before you go?
I'm trying to think. Anything else going on?
Who are your picks for the Kentucky Derby? Is it too early to?
No,
have
here's the
posted yet?
thing. I really
He's
got
going to have to listen to Gene Kershner on the first part of the segment. Once we post the podcast, Josh can go back and listen to my interview with Gene Kershner and be smarter about it.
I'm gonna listen to the pod. I'm gonna get there. I gotta get there. I gotta get the wind swirling. I take a sifter. I take the dirt and I sift it around my nose like such. And then I go, number 7's my favorite number, so I'm going to take that horse. I like this one because my aunt's name is that, and she was an okay lady. She was not that mean to me, so I'll take that horse. And, that one's got 4 legs and doesn't look like it's going to be glue stick next week. So I'll take those 3, wrap them up in a nice little trifecta.
That's not a guarantee around Churchill Downs over the past week.
Oh,
by the way,
has it been bad?
I think 4 horses have been put down this week.
That's our favorite number, 4.
The 4 horsemen. That's not good. That makes me sad.
So have fun down there, Josh.
Man,
watching these animals do your bidding.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for ruining it for me, guy.
Josh, thanks for doing this.
Hey, guys.
Every time you're on, I think we got to do it more often. But then I see that we've been at it for almost an hour, and I'm like, he doesn't have time for this shit.
Yeah, I like shooting the breeze with you guys, whether it's with a cold one or not, preferably a cold one. Maybe next time with a cold one.
I think that's the chances are high.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. Josh Reed from Channel 4. He's that's the CBS affiliate, by the way.
It is. Hi, Josh Reed, CBS Sports affiliate in Buffalo.
Signing
Say
off.
Channel 4, you idiot. Say WIVB. No one needs to hear that.
You got it better than I do. I tell people I write for the Channel 4 website. They're like, hey, what channel is your website? What number?
Yeah. You're like, it's the World Wide Web, fella.
Yeah. Just you'll find it.
You'll find it.
I interviewed Faye Vincent last week, and all throughout he's using my own boss as an example, or my company as an example, because he's trying to talk about labor issues. And so he's like, so let's say Tim Graham from the Atlantic has a situation, and I'm like, he's 83. I'm not going to correct him. But he thinks he's talking to the Atlantic. He's talking to the Atlantic. That's fine.
That's right. Maybe in his
I just
world
won't send him a clip and hurt his feelings. He'd be like, oh, shit. I was talking to the Athletic? Hell, I wouldn't have picked up on that bastard. All right. Enjoy Louisville.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks to everybody out there for watching/listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants.
Thank you.